What's going on, guys? Back at it again with another Ember build for you guys here on the channel. This one I am calling Ambush. I gotta say, this build was a lot better than I expected. Normally when I build an up close and personal type of companion, they're somewhat squishy in the sense that their survivability is limited. Therefore, they die a lot more often, and it kind of sucks because having a dead companion, lo and behold, cannot generate any damage, right? So it makes it a little bit harder to play with a companion in an up close and personal type of fashion. However, this specific build surprised me because she had very little problems staying alive. It's still somewhat a problem for longer fights, but it still ended up being a pretty good build in terms of survivability nonetheless. This build was fantastic in terms of damage, survivability, and everything, so I actually really thoroughly enjoyed this build altogether. If you're excited for this build, guys, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's jump right into this. Alright guys, so I'm actually going to start off with the Khajiit passives because it directly affects the performance of this build. It's called Cunning, and the reason for that being is because it increases critical chance by 3% and increases damage done by 3%. Both of these passives, if you will, increase certain aspects of this build's damage output. The damage done, of course, just flat out increases the damage capabilities of Ember by 3%, and then of course your critical chance by 3%. 3% isn't a huge number for this matter, but it does help nonetheless. So both of these do affect the chances of dealing a lot of damage for Ember. In terms of her first skill, I decided to go with a little bit of survivability. Is like I said in the intro, survivability in up close and personal type of build is typically a problem because they're typically very squishy. Because of that, I decided to slot Razor Cape. Razor Cape reads as Ember envelops themselves in a ring of floating razors, dealing 1,854 physical damage to nearby enemies every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. The razors also shield them from attacks, reducing their damage taken by 20%. So although it does help in the DPS department because it does give you a 1,854 physical damage to enemies for 2 seconds for 8 seconds, it does help in the DPS department, but the main bread and butter that I wanted to slot this for is for the damage reduction by 20%. I'm going to say it again because it's very important. Survivability is a problem for up close and personal builds because they generally are very squishy. And this just helps reduce the squishiness by 20%, allowing her to stay alive just that much faster or longer. The cooldown is an average 12 seconds with a duration of 8 seconds, so it ends up being in a situation in which you do have a few seconds in which it's not being active, but as you guys are going to see in a couple of skills later, this generally isn't a problem because she will have this skill up a lot faster than 12 seconds. So we'll get back to that in a second. In the number 2 slot, we have Swift Assault. Swift Assault reads as Ember floods an enemy with steel battering them with 5 consecutive attacks that each deal 1,854 physical damage. With a cooldown of 8 seconds, this ends up being a fantastic skill all the way around, simply because she is able to keep this or use this skill very, very often. Ends up being a pretty good DPS skill for that reason. I really like this skill, guys, or any skill that is very low cooldown with a moderate amount of damage because it ends up building in the long run. So there's that. In the number 3 slot, we have Shocking Burst. Shocking Burst reads as Ember creates a nexus of storm energy at the target's location, instantly dealing 4,635 shock damage to all enemies in the area and an additional 5,211 shock damage over 8 seconds. I As you guys know, I'm a big fan of these types of skills because it does two types of damages, right? It does an upfront damage of 4,635, but it also gives you a damage over time for 8 seconds of 5,211 damage. The cooldown is at 12 seconds, but as I said before, this will be significantly reduced later on, allowing her to keep this skill up every single chance she gets. Pretty remarkable this skill is, or this build is, so highly recommended. In the number 4 slot, we have a heal. Quick fix reads as Ember patches themselves or an ally with restorative magic healing for 7,590 health, used when Ember or an ally is below 75% health. So as I said before, and I'm gonna say it again, up close and personal builds are very squishy, so having survivability is imperative, so you will have to sacrifice a little bit of DPS in order to keep your companions alive, because of course your companions cannot do DPS if they're dead. So having some survivability is imperative for the survival of your companions. So this is definitely a must in my opinion. It acts as a burst heal, because that's all it does. It just gives you a burst heal, but it also has a cooldown of 8 seconds, which is absolutely fantastic because she will be able to keep using this skill as she needs it. In the number 5 slot is Second Wind. Ember uses their backup resources, reducing the cooldown of all of their other abilities by 5 seconds. This skill is the lifeblood of the DPS side of this build, because once she uses this skill, all of the rest of her skills, the cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. Therefore, that little few seconds of overlap in Razor Cape and in Shocking Burst essentially becomes null and void because of the skill. This does also have a 16-second cooldown, so it's going to be used every second rotation, but it ends up being good nonetheless because, again, this is going to help on her damage dealing. This is also going to help on her survivability with Razor Cape and Quick Fix. This is a very, very important skill to have slotted for this specific build. Highly recommend this, and I think it's a great one at that. In terms of her ultimate, Raging Storm. Raging Storm reads as Ember creates a thunderstorm that follows the target, striking all enemies within for 1,738 shock damage for every 1 second for 8 seconds. The final strike deals 300% additional damage to enemies under 25% health. I've said this before, and I'm gonna say it again. This skill is absolutely fantastic for trash mobs. The reason for that being is because they're typically lower health than, of course, your average boss and stuff like that, but it deals a lot of ticks, 8 ticks to be exact, of 1,738 shock damage, allowing you to just deplete the health of any enemy in the thunderstorm. But that's not all. This skill also acts as an execute, seen as for enemies that are under 25% health and within the storm, the final strike deals an additional 300% additional damage, which is absolutely fantastic. When the first half of this skill is trickling down their health, the ones that are under 25% health at the end of that ends up getting hit by 300% more damage on top of that, effectively being an execute. Great skill nonetheless, not really fantastic for boss fights or anything like that, but for trash mobs, this skill is absolutely insane. With that being said, let's go ahead and check out her gear. So when I gear up my companions, I like to build them up in the same fashion that I build up my own characters. What I mean by that is simple. When I build my own characters, I typically go with a 2-piece 5 set, or 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece monster set. Monster sets aren't really a thing for companions, so I will just call it a 2-piece set, essentially having 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece set. In terms of the first 2-piece set, we have Aggressive and Medium. Aggressive is important and is the lifeblood of the damage capabilities of a DPS build in general, but for Ember specifically. For each piece equipped, it increases the damage done by 1.7% for each piece equipped, assuming you're using purple gear. Also, the weight of this is in medium for a reason, because the medium passive For armor, also increases the damage done by 1% for each piece of medium armor equipped, as you guys can see there, making it very important to have medium equipped. So both of these are medium in aggressive. In terms of your first 5-piece set, lo and behold, we have aggressive yet again in medium. This again is going to increase your damage done by 1.7% for each piece slotted. On top of that, you have your medium passive, which also gives you an additional 1% per slotted piece, therefore increasing your damage output by an additional 7%, seeing as we have 7 pieces equipped. Absolutely recommend this setup, guys. Very, very, very fantastic. In terms of your final 5-piece set, I actually went with Shattering, which increases penetration by 1,300 per piece equipped. We have all the jewelry and the weapons in Shattering, increasing your penetration by a pretty significant margin, in my opinion. And of course, with aggressive matched up with Shattering, it ends up being a pretty good matchup, to say the least. With that being said, let's go ahead and go over to the house and check out her fashion. So this one is kind of boring in the sense that I don't have much going on for it. In terms of the costume, I do have the Budai shirt and Gallus skins. I can't pronounce that, guys, so forgive me for that. In terms of dyes, I actually like the way it looks just the way it is, so I decided to just leave this blank. However, you guys can definitely experiment and see what you guys would like. I couldn't really think or come up with anything that I actually liked that was better than what it looks like right off the bat, so I just decided to leave it the way it is. In terms of weapons, both weapons are Khajiit Dagger 4, and the dyes is Volunteers Iron, Blood Gold, and Motif Master Brown. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think of this specific fashion for Ember. With that being said, let's go ahead and see if we can solo a world boss. And there you guys have it. The ambush build, as you guys saw, is an actual good DPS, damaging, if you will, dealing build with a good set of survivability. So I do recommend this build for that purpose. Not to mention her ultimate is very good for some trash mobs and stuff like that. So this is a good build to have for random questing and things of that nature, right? It's not really meant for like boss fights, although she can hold up just fine as you guys saw. The fact of the matter is, this is just a good overall build for whatever it is that you need her to do in terms of damage dealing. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.